I thought that you and no one was even allowed to sue Pfizer. Why are you suing Pfizer, and how are you suing Pfizer?
Well, we're bringing in the state of Kansas, a Kansas Consumer Protection Act action against Pfizer. We're seeking civil monetary penalties, damages, and injunctive relief for misleading and deceptive statements made in marketing its COVID vaccine. And yet you alluded to the fact that the vaccine manufacturers were given immunity for tort lawsuits based on injuries from people who took the vaccine and then suffered some adverse side effect. But the manufacturers did not have and do not have the ability or under the law to deceive the public in marketing their vaccines. And so we're bringing a consumer protection action, and other states have the same ability under their laws, and we brought it in Kansas State Court.
Very good. So what exactly are you suggesting they misled and deceived?
Well, there's a great deal. We have a 69-page complaint that goes into considerable detail, but I'll just highlight a couple of the biggest examples. One is with respect to pregnant women. Pfizer marketed its vaccine as safe for pregnant women. However, in two different studies, we know they had information indicating the contrary, and they did not, did not share, and their statements did not reflect that information. As early as October 2020, Pfizer possessed information from its own study on rats, indicating that its vaccine was linked to infertility, loss of litters, and stillborn offspring. And then a few months later, in February 2021, at that point, the vaccine was being given to people, and they possessed reports for 458 pregnant women who received the Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine during pregnancy. And more than half of the pregnant women reported an adverse event, and more than 10% reported a miscarriage, many within days of the vaccination. And that, let's pause on that 10% number. That's a baby that died in the womb, over 10%. And that information was never shared with the public. They continue to market the vaccine as safe for pregnant women. Another one that I think is noteworthy is myocarditis. Pfizer denied any evidence of connection or safety signal between its vaccine and myocarditis. And even as late as January 2023, when the Pfizer chairman and CEO, Albert Bourla, was asked whether the Pfizer vaccine caused strokes or myocarditis, his statement was, quote, "We've not seen a single signal, although we have distributed billions of doses," end quote. And he's referring to a safety signal, which is a negative consequence. But Pfizer knew at that point, the U.S. government, the U.S. military, and others had found that its vaccine caused myocarditis and pericarditis. So, this deceptive marketing.
That's enough for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's enough. I got a lot of questions. So you say marketing. This has to be more than just some guest on CNN said or Fauci said, right? So you have to be looking at the marketing of Pfizer. What is that? What was Pfizer's marketing other than, before it goes to the U.S. Open in tennis? This segment brought to you by Pfizer. What marketing does Pfizer do?
Yeah, that's a good question. So it's public statements that are made with the intention of influencing members of the public to buy the products. It doesn't always have to be a paid-for advertisement. It can also be things like the statement made by the CEO. But all of these statements are made in a very strange environment. Let's remember, back in 2021, beginning of 2021, many employers were suddenly forcing their employees to get the vaccine. And so people are operating under duress. Other people decided voluntarily to take the vaccine, but they felt a sense of anxiety and panic that they needed to do so in a hurry. And in that situation, you had millions and millions of Americans trying to quickly decide which vaccine should I take. And in that environment, it's imperative that the consumer has true information. You cannot deceive, under our laws, you cannot deceive the public, and Americans needed the truth at that point. And so that's really what this lawsuit's all about. If you have information indicating your product is causing severe health consequences, you can't be withholding that when you advertise it. And you certainly can't be saying to the public, no, our product doesn't cause those problems.
Okay, so that you could that's right. You could be withholding the truth or straight up lying.
Yeah.
And it seems like they did the latter. But correct me if I'm wrong, Attorney General of Kansas, you, I'm sure, need to prove that they knew these things were
Absolutely.
that it caused myocarditis. But how are you going to prove that? And how did you get a hold of these studies?
Well, ultimately the court will decide if we have sufficiently proved it. And the interesting thing about obtaining the information is much of this information in our complaint comes from a FOIA lawsuit, information that finally became public after a Freedom of Information Act lawsuit that was brought by an association of physicians. And so this information wasn't, much of the information wasn't voluntarily provided. We had to wait until the information was finally coughed up after a legal battle. And so that's the basis of our complaint, which is the first stage of the lawsuit. But then as we go forward, the company, the defendant Pfizer, will have to respond to discovery requests and other information and depositions and such. So we expect there to be more information coming out as well.
So you're suing in Kansas. Let's say you guys win. What are the ramifications for Pfizer? Is the blast radius contained in Kansas,
No.
Or does it go beyond?
Well, we have many examples of this where, I think one of the best examples of this scope is probably the tobacco manufacturers in the 1990s. And I'm not suggesting that the COVID vaccine is like smoking, but my point is that a few states began suing because of the failure to warn about the adverse effects of smoking. And once it became clear that a state was going to win, all 50 states piled on. And I think that will probably happen.
Okay.
I think that's, to answer your question, that's probably a good analogy.
Okay, so it is only initially relevant in Kansas, but then Missouri, Texas, blah, 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 everyone else is going to jump on board and then have their own.
And at this stage, we already have 5, although it's grown to 7 states who have said they intend to be part of a coalition. In other words, they will follow. They've already indicated that they will follow on. And so that the next move really is Pfizer's. They have to decide if they want to fight this out in court or if they want to, negotiate a settlement. We'll see what they choose to do.
Well, what do you want to do? Because the consequences are going to be important here. I think everyone is, the Sackler family, right, with Purdue Pharmaceutical and the opioid epidemic. And you look at the money, and I forget it off the top of the head, but, they made something like $10 billion, and they had to pay a $2 billion fine. And to them, it's just like the price of doing business, whatever. That's just what it is. So do you know how much money Pfizer made from this? And if they're like, yeah, sure, whatever, here's 2% of that, we don't care. Is that enough, or do you want to go more than that?
Well, I think they made in excess of $75 billion, if memory serves.
75 billion.
Billion, yeah. It's an extraordinary number. But I think there are multiple objectives in a suit like this. Well, there are multiple objectives. One is to recover some money on behalf of the state and people who may have suffered, or I think virtually all were deceived by the marketing statements. But some financial compensation is one thing. But I think even more important is deterring not only Pfizer, but all pharmaceutical companies from making statements that are misleading in the future, because this probably won't be the last pandemic we see. And that's important too. And those are the principal reasons for doing this. But I think a third one is in the discovery process, which is where we will be making requests for production of documents from Pfizer in the lawsuit. There will be more we can learn. I mean, I think one thing we've seen with in these years after the COVID-19 pandemic is we learn more and more about what we didn't know at the time. And I think that's valuable for the public as well.
Why did this all fall on you, Attorney General of Kansas?
Well, someone had to step forward and do this as the information came out, and I'm not the only one. Ken Paxton of Texas has also filed suit. And as I say, there are other attorneys general who have indicated they're ready to go next. So, it just took someone to step forward and do it.
There's 28 Republican or conservative attorney generals across the country. Yeah, I'm grateful you did. What's the heat? Why would someone not? What's the negative consequences of doing this?
I don't know. I mean, I think, well, I do know. I mean, one is obviously that there was an immense public and government-generated pressure throughout the pandemic to say nothing if you had any reservations, and I think that's a little bit true today, but less so. But this really isn't about personal reservations one individual might have. This is about what we now know that the company did in marketing the product. And obviously, Pfizer is a giant. Pfizer is a huge company with great resources. And, it should be said, Pfizer has done many wonderful things. They've produced exceptional pharmaceuticals that have done great things for people and for their health. But that doesn't alleviate a great company from needing to be truthful and non-misleading with respect to every statement they make in every drug that they sell or vaccine.
Yeah, this is great. All right, this is great. I know we're cheering this on, celebrating this, and I want to encourage you, Attorney General of Kansas. Last question, if I may. I can't wait to see how this is characterized by the media moving forward here. I'm guessing it will be probably ignored for a while, and we'll see how successful you are with it, and then they'll come at you pretty hardcore. But I'm also sure that this will be characterized as some sort of lawfare. You're fighting because it'll be under that big umbrella with Trump is accusing the left of lawfare, and here now you Republican attorney generals, now you're out suing everyone as well. The Attorney General of Missouri is suing New York. I don't exactly know the details of how he's able to. Can one state sue another state like that? Is that a thing? But
yes,
this is all,
yes, that can be done. But when I hear the term lawfare, I think of it as using the courts to achieve some political victory that you couldn't otherwise achieve through normal political ends. So it's
That's a good
legal
definition.
warfare. So this I think is really more commonplace. Obviously, the defendant is not commonplace, but states have been bringing consumer protection actions against large companies for decades now, and have been achieving monetary penalties against those companies, and have been recovering money for the people of their states for a long time. So what we're doing is really not all that unusual. It's just that the subject of this litigation is unusual. It's, of course, the Pfizer vaccine.